And welcome to the Council, City of Norwich, September 18th. Those of you who can, please stand, and Alderman Martin will lead us in prayer.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration will instill respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representatives, and that peace and harmony will mark all our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the citizens of our community. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And Alderwoman Philbrook, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight is our night where folks can speak about non-agenda items. These are items of concern about the city that you may have, and they do not have to be on the agenda. I will ask you to please state your name and address clearly into the microphone so that folks at home can hear as well, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. We've had a couple people sign up, and the first is Rebecca Malucci.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Malucci. I live at 303 Mohegan Park Road in Norwich. I'm here because I was very surprised to hear that there's a Burger King going in Norwich that is basically across the street from where the Stop and Shop gas station is, and right next door to that is a McDonald's. Now that's a very busy road to begin with, and we all know that they like to use the McDonald's as a cut-through so they don't have to stop at the red light. But that's not my main concern. My main concern, it is near the historic district. I don't think it belongs there. Benny's is going to be empty. Why don't they move in there? I mean, you know, there's an epidemic in this country of childhood obesity. Why would you put a fast food place in? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, I don't know. I'm new to Norwich. I've only been here 4 years. I guess you'd call me new blood. Everybody else here, they've been here a number of years. They're old blood. I think a lot of people in Norwich have become very complacent. They just go along and, yeah, this is happening, that's happening. Well, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be changed. Why can't it be changed? It's got to be changed. This is wrong. We do not need a Burger King. We do not need another fast food place. I think it's the worst thing in the world you can do. And I do believe that many people in this city are too complacent. And I'm not. I have a lot of questions. I question and question and question, and I question because I am new blood, I'm not old blood. And I do hope that that Burger King is not a done deal and it doesn't go in. My other issue is Mohegan Park. Really, you know, no lifeguards, no swimming. It's supposed to be the pearl of Norwich. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I just think more has to be done to ensure that there is swimming, there is a beach, and children can go there, families can go there. I mean, they're swimming there anyways. You're worried about them suing the city? They're going to sue the city. Somebody is going to drown. I mean, take the fence down, just swim at your own risk. I lived in Guilford. I lived near the beach. It was open 365 days of the year. No lifeguard. It was fine. Nobody drowned. And if you have it open, at least more people will go, and if somebody is in trouble, there'll be somebody there to help them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rodney Bowie.
Good evening. Rodney Bowie, 62 Roosevelt Avenue. By now, most of you folks know that I'm a landlord. I had a bunch of knuckleheads in an apartment just recently. They were under an eviction order. I had between 8 and 10 people at all times, out on porches, hanging off of balconies and whatever. The noise level was so bad that people across the street were calling me, calling police. Had 17 calls the last time I checked with a police officer, and this about 3-4 more days after that. They wouldn't, couldn't, or didn't do anything about the noise, about any kind of threatening. I was told by 2 or 3 officers there is no noise ordinance in the city. Well, it's time we started doing something about the noise. I can hear a Harley go down Route 12, and I want to live on Roosevelt Avenue, which is across the river. And I think it's time we did something about that particular thing. When I was a kid, police officer with no particular education at all would say, rev that thing up for me, son. And if it sounded like you had glass packs on it, that's $300 he just lost. Now that was in Maine. Of course, they don't have a level of education we got here, so I assumed that maybe they were doing something wrong. But something's got to happen. If I can be cited for disturbance of the peace after being slugged by one of the tenants, after I never even raised my voice or anything else, if I can be cited for disturbance of the peace when I was slugged in the back of my head going down a set of stairs, I think that the police officers here can do something about a bunch of knuckleheads that are raising hell all over the place, or at least give a control of apartments and things back to the landlords, because I could have cleared all 5 of them out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak about something of concern that is not on the agenda? Yes, sir?
Good evening, David Crabb, 47 Prospect Street. My 2-page handout bridges the years from the beginning of the financial crisis, that's March and September of 2008, when initially Bear Stearns stock plunged from $67 to $2 in a short period of time from over-reliance on mortgage-backed securities. And that was followed when 158-year-old Lehman Brothers had to file for bankruptcy because the government denied them the same bailout that they favored Bear Stearns with. The Forbes article has a graph titled Slowdown, showing the ratio between dividing GDP by the monetary base. And it goes from 1979 to the events just mentioned, where it plunged more than 30% for the financial crisis. That's a dramatic loss of revenue for the government. You might remember that when the Constitution was ratified, the only way the government could comply with the gold standard was by selling U.S. bonds to the states, until 1913, when the income tax added them another source. The mortgage-backed securities matter was the result of garage sale competition over liar's loans that banks then sold to Freddie Mae and Sallie Mac, or Freddie Mac and Sallie Mae, 2 government-sponsored enterprise funds. The housing bubble pop hit the GDP hard just 10 years from the info age bubble at the end of the Clinton administration. Government spending for the Mideast wars was the only part of GDP not affected, and that's why the graph didn't go even lower. Now, 10 years from the financial crash, housing prices are back to 2008 in most markets. However, the damage in Texas and Florida from 2 hurricanes was so great that Congress voted to allow almost $150 billion for the catastrophes National debt was just $300 billion in 1950 when I was a sophomore. Nobody knew nor cared because the international gold standard kept Congress spending under control to a degree. Now foreign governments that shielded their gold here during World War II are taking possession. Russia and China are reneging on 40-year-old agreements to pay for fossil fuel U.S. greenbacks, plus adding gold to the revenues to back rubles and yuan. The article in the Day for Friday highlights how kick the can for taxpayers has affected
Thank you, sir.
Connecticut.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on non-agenda items? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on non-agenda items? Yes, sir.
My name's John Blackburn, 15 Alice Street, Norwich, Connecticut. Last month I spoke about the Tribute to America and what it was all about, how it was started and all that, and I ran out of time. Well, I'm not going to rehash that. I'm just going to add to it. Consider this part 2. I don't know if there'll be a part 3, but it's okay. That Tribute to America was a good ceremony. It went real well. The thing of it is, I have to decide which veterans organization I am going to represent, because I belong to VFW 594. I'm a life member there. I'm a life member to the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 270, and I also represent VFW 594 on the Vets Council. So I have to decide which one I'm going to represent. Now that's a little bit of a problem, but not much. I just have to choose one. And if it's a VFW function 594, which the case being with Tribute to America, well, naturally I was involved with that because I was on the committee. And I also end up leading the color guards and placing them, as well as lining them up. And my buddy, John Wagner, he was the master of ceremonies. Someone else was supposed to do that, so he kind of inherited that. But every year, there's a trophy that goes to the biggest, the biggest color guard, the most members in the color. It's always the young Marines, because they show up. That they do that because they have to, I think. And our group, BFW, not BFW, we don't have a color guy. Anyway, the veterans of the veterans, Vietnam veterans, Chapter 270, we barely have enough to have a color guy. They went out there with 3 flags. They were 2. My brother came along with me, and he got volunteered to carry the Vietnam flag. So there was 3 out there. And that's it. And any veteran who wants to march, just see John Wagner or myself in any parade or any event, we'll place you behind the color guard. It doesn't have to be uniform. You can have a service cap, whatever. Just show up, be there, we'll place you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? I declare this hearing, this public hearing closed. Thank you. Thank you all very much for your comments.
Public hearings. An ordinance appropriating $800,000 for the planning, acquisition, and construction of improvements to Norwich Golf Course and authorizing the issue of $800,000 bonds of the city to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
I have too many papers. I declare this public hearing on said proposed ordinance open.
A report from the Commission on the City Plan. August 22nd, 2017. The Honorable Mayor and all the persons of the Council in the City of Norwich. Reference, an ordinance appropriating $800,000 for the planning, acquisition, and construction of improvements to Norwich Golf Course, and authorizing the issue of $800,000 bonds of the city to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof and making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. The Commission on the City Plan, at its August 15, 2017 regular meeting, reviewed the above referenced referral. Seated were Chairman Art Sharon, Frank Manfredi, Les King, Kathy Wazika, and Jason Art. After careful consideration, the Commission voted unanimously to forward a favorable recommendation to the Council pursuant to Chapter 15, Section 4 of the City Charter. Reason, it is consistent with the plan of conservation and development because it supports recreational pursuits of the residents of the city, recommends improvement of the city's infrastructure, and will assist with the conservation of drinking water. Respectfully submitted, Art Sharon, Chairman.
We will now ask people who would like to speak in favor of this ordinance. It's a little confusing because I have people that signed up and I'm not sure which ordinance that you wanted to speak about. Does that mean I can't talk anymore?
I don't know why that was. Sorry.
They're supposed to let me talk. I have some names on here, but as I said, it doesn't say which ordinance you want to speak of. So if I call your name and you are not speaking in favor of the ordinance concerning the golf course, I'll get you next time. Joe Williams?
Sorry about that, Mayor. I should have indicated myself and the next two people after me are here for the second public hearing.
Okay, thank you. That would be Joe Williams, Colleen Medeiros, and Matt. Okay.
Yes.
How about Jeannie Savada? Is that for the? You're with the second. And how about Paul Agranovich? Second. Thank you all. So I will ask people who would like to speak in favor, and that is again, your name and address. If you are working in Norwich and you do not live here, please include your home address as well. And you have 3 minutes to let us know your thoughts. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor?
Good evening. My name is Barney Caulfield. I'm 535 New London Turnpike. I'm the chairman of the Norwich Golf Course Authority. I'd like to speak in favor of the ordinance proposing the bond of $800,000 to the golf course. We've been in service since '79, I believe, and we have always paid our bills, and we think that we need this money to keep us going. We have tried to go about getting more water for us because the water seems to be our big dumping spot. And J.P. Marine here is the chairman of our water commission or committee, and he can fill you in better than I can.
Thank you, Barney. John Paul Marine, 22 Mediterranean Lane in Norwich Town. As the chairman indicated, we have had increased expenses on our water. Last year was close to, if not over, $100,000. This year, due to the rain, it hasn't been quite that bad. But in trying to keep a quality course open for the public, we've had to do quite a bit of cutbacking on quite a few different areas, and mostly maintenance. And if you don't have a good golf course, people aren't going to come. So we tried to look at this the best way we could as far as where can we come up with savings. And it seems as though that if we build this pond and do our own irrigation rather than using public drinking water, which we've been doing, then we can save quite a bit of money. It's going to take a little while to get to that point, but this is one of the ways that we think we can do it. We think it's important. It saves drinking water. It's going to keep the quality of the golf course open, and that's what we're trying to do, and we really appreciate your support on this. And could I just ask a raise of hands of those who are here supporting that this evening? And if there's any questions later on, we'll do our best to answer them.
Okay, thank you
so
very
much
much.
for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Hearing none, those opposed? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Yes, sir?
Rodney Boyd, 62 Roosevelt Avenue. I'm basically opposed to $800,000 to be spent on the golf course. I took a look at their estimates of income, and they're running a $46,000 debt this particular year. If we add $800,000 to that indebtedness, I figure it's roughly almost double that the golf course is really on the hook for, or that we're subsidizing them for. Having said that, if they can solve the water problem, they'll solve most of that problem, because they're running $100-some thousand for the water itself, and their deficit is 46. That would leave them slack of $60,000 to mess with. But to just give them a blank check of $800,000 and say go out and just spread it all over the place, I'd like to see a more defined work order put out on this particular thing before you do turn $800,000 over. But the well system has to be the top priority. And there are many municipalities around this part of the country that actually use a well system for water. As you may know, I'm your representative to the Water Authority of Southeastern Connecticut. And many of the towns have a well system, and it works very well. And we also have a brook that runs right alongside of it. But what the DEP has to say about us infringing on the flow of that water, I wouldn't know, wouldn't hesitate to guess. But the golf course is ours. It's us. It's something that we have to maintain. We own it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Hearing none, this public hearing is closed. Thank you all for your comments on this matter.
An ordinance amending Section 6.3 of the Norwich zoning regulations as adopted by ordinance number 1721 on 10/19/2015, entitled Motor Vehicle Sales and Repair. This public hearing was published in the Bulletin newspaper.
Wait a minute. I declare this public hearing on said proposed ordinance open.
It was published in the newspaper September 6th and September 13th for this public hearing tonight on the amendment, and it was stated for tonight, September 18th.
And I believe we have some other
So we have reports from the Commission on City Plan. On August 22nd, 2017, the Honorable Mayor and all the persons of the Council of the City of Norwich reference an ordinance amending Section 6.3 of the Norwich zoning regulations as adopted by ordinance number 1721 on 10/19/2015, entitled Motor Vehicle Sales and Repair. The Commission on the City Plan at its August 15th, 2017 regular meeting reviewed the above referenced referral. Seated were Chairman Art Sharon, Frank Manfredi, Les King, Kathy Wazika, and Jason Art. After careful consideration, the Commission voted 4-1 to forward a favorable recommendation to the Council pursuant to Chapter 15, Section 4 of the City Charter. Reason, it is consistent with the plan of conservation and development because it promotes opportunities for economic development and facilitates desired growth, including the adaptive reuse of buildings and sites. Respectively submitted, Art Sharon, Chairman. I have a letter from Connecticut Department of Energy Environmental Protection. Subject, Connecticut Deep. Comments on CGMA, Connecticut General Statutes, Section 22A-104E, zone change referral to amend Section 6.3 regulations relative to garages and filling stations, motor vehicle sales and repair. Remove mandatory requirement for public hearings. Unless required by zone, remove the 1,000-foot separation distance between gasoline filling stations. Dear board members, thank you for notifying this office of the above noted coastal site plan review, CSPR, application received on August 8, 2017. The text amendment is described above. The Land and Water Resources Division, formerly the Ocean of Long Island Sound Programs, OLISP, has reviewed the text regulation amendment in accordance with the Connecticut Coastal Management Act, CCMA. Specifically, Connecticut General Statutes, Section 22A-104E, and finds the regulation changes consistent with the goals and policies of the CCMA. We hope these comments prove useful to the Council in their review of this proposal. These comments are made in response to the review requirements contained within CGSC Section 22A-104E of the Connecticut Coastal Management Act, CCMA, which requires the referral be received by DEEP 35 days prior to the scheduling of the local public hearing. Our comments do not necessarily reflect other planning and zoning considerations which may apply. Please feel free to contact me at 860-424-3623 or marcy.balint@ct.gov with any questions you may have regarding these comments or any coastal management concerns. Thank you. Sincerely, Marcy L. Balint, Senior Coastal Planner, Land and Water Resources Division. I have a letter from Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments. Dear Ms. Rhodes, I am writing in response to the proposed text amendment to Section 6.3 of the of the City of Norwich zoning regulations. As referenced in your correspondence dated August 8, 2017, the proposed amendments were referred to this agency under the provisions of Section 8-3B of the Connecticut General Statutes and were received on August 11th. The proposed text amendments seek to remove minimum separation distances between gasoline stations and eliminate mandatory public hearing requirements for gasoline stations. Based on a review of the material submitted, CCOG staff concluded that the proposed amendments to the zoning regulations would not have an adverse intermunicipal impact. If you have questions, please contact me at 860-889-2324. Sincerely, Samuel S. Alexander, Planner.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
please forgive the interruption. I'm getting messages that the people can't hear us on the mics on the TV.
Okay, so everybody talk more
Loud,
into the
yeah.
mics.
Sorry, thank you.
Get closer. Thank you for that information. We've also received letters from attorneys involved in this ordinance. So I would ask you to please read into the record letters you have sent as you give your presentation. So again, I will ask for those speaking in favor, please state your name and address. And I believe this is Mr. Williams.
Yes, it is. Good evening, Mayor and alderpersons. Attorney Joe Williams with Shipman & Goodwin, 1 Constitution Plaza in Hartford. I'm proud to be here this evening representing Cumberland Farms on this application. You'll also hear right after me from Colleen Medeiros from McMahon Associates, who's our traffic engineer, and Matt Leidner from Civil Design Group, who is our civil engineer. And they're one of our A teams in designing new Cumberland Farms sites throughout New England, and they will address some of the issues raised in a letter that you received, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Cumberland Farms is proposing to amend the Norwich zoning regulations because it would like to bring forward a proposal to redevelop and revitalize an abandoned property at the corner of New London Turnpike and West Main Street with a new retail store and gasoline fueling facility. If you give us the chance to bring our proposal before the City Plan Commission, and if it's approved, Cumberland Farms will invest several $million in cleaning up the property and in building an attractive new business location that will create approximately 20 new jobs here in the city of Norwich. Now, unfortunately, as the zoning regulations are currently written, we can't bring our proposal forward. And that's not because the use is prohibited by the zoning, but rather it's simply because there is another gas station already located across the intersection from the property that we're focused on. And the regulations prohibit, as you heard, gas stations within 1,000 feet of another gas station. So we're asking you simply to lift that initial barrier to entry and let us come in with a proposal for a full review by the Commission on the City Plan. As was mentioned, you have a letter from that Commission on City Plan giving a favorable recommendation. You also should have, is there not a letter from Bob Mills of NCDC that I believe he emailed in?
We'll take care of that and when we finish with everybody's
good.
presentation.
So you do have a letter from Bob Mills expressing NCDC's support for our amendment. And as you heard, you also have letters from Connecticut DEP and from CCOG finding no adverse impacts and consistency with the Coastal Management Act. So let me summarize for you 3 reasons why we submit that you should grant this application. The first is what I would call the rule of do no harm. And maybe it's sort of a Hippocratic oath that every legislator should take. And this proposal truly does no harm in the sense that by granting this application for text amendment, you're giving up nothing. What do I mean by that? As you hopefully saw in the application materials we submitted, the state statutes were amended several years ago to streamline the process for approving the locations for new gas stations. And in doing so, the state legislature removed mandatory factors for consideration that had been contained within the statute, and they removed the requirement for a public hearing for the location approval certificate that you have to obtain. And so our amendment will update and streamline your zoning regulation to bring it into line with state statutes. And it does that by removing the mandatory factors to be considered for location approval, other than the fact that the location has to be suitable and has to be consistent with public safety. Those are the key things that remain. It removes the prohibition on gas stations within 1,000 feet of each other, and it removes the requirement for a public hearing for the certificate of location approval. Note that under the amendment we're proposing, the City Plan Commission still reviews, as I said, still reviews the location for public safety and for site suitability. And gas stations always, anywhere that they're allowed in the city of Norwich, a gas station will always require a special permit, which means by state law and by your regulations, it will always have to have a public hearing before the City Plan Commission. So there's going to be a public hearing anyway, even under the amendment that we propose. So the City Plan Commission will still get the same information and the public will still be heard. You're just giving the City Plan Commission a little more flexibility to be able to look at an application and to decide if it's a good proposal. So you're giving up nothing. Point number 2, our amendment offers the revitalization of an important commercial gateway in Norwich. I mentioned how you're losing nothing by granting the amendment, but Norwich would be gaining an opportunity for a multi-million-dollar investment and for the redevelopment and revitalization of a key intersection that, frankly, the property we're talking about is in rough shape, and I'm sure anybody who has seen it would agree. And that investment, that redevelopment, would likely increase the value of that property substantially, which I imagine the tax assessor would notice. And I believe Bob Mills, in his letter, I just want to read one little piece of it to you. I believe Bob Mills said it best in his letter to the council dated September 15th. This is his third paragraph. He wrote, "Approving this proposed text amendment change would facilitate the cleanup of a long vacant corner of a major gateway into the city at West Main Street and New London Turnpike. Additionally, it will support the needs of our citizens and visitors with a proposed Cumberland Farms while facilitating new investment and economic development." I couldn't say it better than Bob, so I won't belabor that point. But I would add, we would also hope that that investment would spur additional investments by other businesses in the area. I also want you to know that if our proposal goes forward and is granted, the redevelopment of the site that Cumberland Farms will undertake will look a lot like the photos you see here on these boards. I actually have extra copies of one of them to give you. Thought that might be helpful given the boards are a little far away. Yeah, hand those up. Those are photographs of a new Cumberland Farms that was just finished about a month ago in the town of New Milford, Connecticut. And it's a prototype of the store design and of the overall site layout that, as I said, would be very similar to what Cumberland Farms would like to do here in Norwich. So I hope you see, as we believe, that in addition to that economic revitalization, it would also be a major aesthetic improvement to that key commercial gateway. And it will send a message to any businesses that might consider coming into Norwich that this is a thriving, successful community, and therefore it's a great place for your business to invest. And on the topic of that message that it would send is my third reason that we believe you should grant this application, and that is that it promotes competition and economic development. Your regulations with regard to gas stations currently prevent competition and economic development. You can't even look at a proposal, we can't even show you a proposal because of that 1,000-foot separation requirement. Your Plan of Conservation and Development from 2013 has a very good chapter in it called Promote Economic Development. It's at pages 26 through 29. I just want to cite one particular part of it I think is highly relevant. The goal on page 28, that is C, it's called Facilitate New Economic Development. And it states, since many communities are competing for economic development, Norwich should be sure to dedicate adequate resources to attracting economic development to the city. And under that goal, the third strategy listed is, continue to facilitate and streamline the economic development process in Norwich. And we submit to you that the text amendment we're proposing to you would do exactly that. And it is true, I think we all know, that towns and cities in Connecticut do compete for economic development. And we did some research, it's cited in the materials we gave you with our application, and we found that of the 6 towns immediately surrounding Norwich, only one of those towns, Sprague, has this type of minimum separation requirement between gas stations. So I think the question that needs to be asked is, in the competition for economic development, why should Norwich be fighting with one hand tied behind its back? Even in an election season, I bet we can all agree that sometimes the best thing government can do to encourage new business growth is to get out of the way. So that's what we're hopefully enabling you to do. In sum, approving this text amendment would achieve several objectives. It will implement the goals of your Plan of Conservation and Development. It will update your regulations, but maintaining a full and thorough review of the proposal with a public hearing by the City Plan Commission. It will streamline a permitting process in Norwich. It will promote competition among businesses, and that's when the consumer wins. And it will send a message to the business world that Norwich is open for business, and that if you want to invest in our community, come see us and we'd be glad to look at your proposal. Now, I expect you'll hear tonight from some that oppose competition. And whenever I hear that a business is opposed to competition, it sends up a red flag for me. And you should ask yourself, if you hear from those people, is this person here to promote the best interests of the people of Norwich, or is the person here only to protect their own wallet? And you have a letter from Attorney Heller, who represents the owner of the gas station at our intersection, predicting a parade of horribles that will happen, that he believes will happen if you grant this text amendment. To that, I would just like to make 3 quick points. First, it would be fair to ask Attorney Heller if those things happen at the gas stations run by his client, because they don't happen at Cumberland Farms. Second, you have in the submittal materials from me, and as the council is probably aware, there's at least 2 locations in Norwich at which gas stations are clustered near each other within 1,000 feet, as far as I know, without the problems that are predicted by Attorney Heller. Now, should we just pull up the drawbridge of competition and let those people have the market all to themselves, or should they have to compete like everybody else? Third point I would make is, as any good operator should do, Cumberland Farms takes great care to design its sites to avoid the types of issues discussed by Attorney Heller. I hope it looks that way on the photo I just gave you. But I don't want you just to take my word for it. I brought with me tonight 2 highly qualified experts who have substantial experience designing and obtaining permits for Cumberland Farms locations all around the state of Connecticut and throughout New England. They will explain to you at a higher level, not focused on a particular site, the nature of the traffic that visits these facilities, the type of rigorous permitting process they have to go through, and how a well-engineered site design can avoid many of the types of issues that Attorney Heller discusses in his letter. Colleen Medeiros is here. She's our traffic engineer. You have a memo from her, which she will walk the commission through. And then you'll hear from Matt Leidner on site engineering. And I hope, after hearing from them and with the points that I have made to you and everything we've submitted, you will see that if you grant this text amendment, we will come back to the city with a professional proposal that will thoroughly address all the potential issues, and we ask that you just give us the chance to do that. So we're respectfully requesting your approval, and so I don't have to get up again and say it, if you're inclined to approve the application, we ask you to make sure you state your finding on the record that the application is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development, because you're required by state statute to do that. And we ask that you set an effective date, which is also required by state statute. And I thank you.
Thank you, sir. I believe now Colleen Medeiros.
Good evening. My name is Colleen Medeiros with McMahon Associates. I'm a licensed professional engineer, and I'm project manager with McMahon Associates. Our offices are located at 360 Bloomfield Ave in Windsor, Connecticut. Our firm specializes exclusively in transportation engineering. We're not a full-service firm, so we have actually the routine experience with permitting over 150 Cumberland Farms, as well as other types of gas station convenience stores throughout New England. So we're well versed and experienced with the traffic generating characteristics for these sites. So we have a memo that I provided. It was dated August 30th, and I kind of want to just provide an overview of that memo, and if you do need me to read that into the record as well, please let me know. But I can at least start with the overview. The key points we touch upon is the trip generation characteristics for the typical convenience store gas station, the potential impacts that come from this type of development, the permitting process, and then the overall site design, which will be further discussed by our civil engineer. From a trip generation standpoint, as traffic engineers, we follow national guidelines. It's, you ever heard of the Institute of Transportation Engineers? It's our handbook, our Bible. It provides estimates on different types of land uses of what they might generate based on variables. Not getting into specifics for a specific store with the number of pumps, but generally what we find with a gas station and a convenience store is that it's broken out into 2 types of trips that are attracted to the site. New trips, which are not on the roadway today. So it's someone going to a new site specific for a specific reason, maybe to get, milk that night. But the other type of trips that is attributed to this type of land use is called pass-by traffic. And these vehicles are already on the road passing by this site. They will simply turn off in the direction that they're traveling because there is a new convenience store that they need, gas that day, and it's convenient. They need it, and then they will turn off and they will return in the same direction they are traveling. So what we find is this site typically peaks during commuter peak periods, morning and afternoon, people going to and from school, and because it's convenience-based. It has, things that people need at that time. So based on ITE data that I referenced, we're finding that the majority of traffic goes to the site is passed by approximately 63 to 66%. So these sites aren't adding more traffic necessarily. The majority is passed by, they're on the roadway. Cumberland Farms has actually done their own studies of their sites and finding this number is actually higher, closer to 80%. But from our standpoint, we use the conservative numbers in our traffic studies. And the other point is, because we're highly passed by, there's other uses that could go on a potential site, that could be permitted in retail in nature, that could be a higher generator, theoretically, when we look at it, because it doesn't have that pass-by component. So we think that we find that this type of land use is not a major traffic generator because it's complementary to the roadway network itself. And then we do look at the potential impacts. That's part of our traffic study that we perform. But what we're finding is that when we look at the sites, new sites, or typically coming from also redevelops their existing inadequate sites as well, we find that our assumptions on this pass-by in nature is founded because people are finding the path of least resistance. So we're finding some sites that do have opposing gas stations on a major arterial roadway, and we're seeing that people are utilizing gas stations that are on the right side of the road that provide right turn access, whereas instead of crossing a major roadway with left turns. So people will find that they'll be able to turn right. It's easier, path of least resistance, and then they can simply turn right back onto the roadway. So having two opposing gasoline stations is actually complementary to the roadway, providing motorists safe options. They don't need to, when they need gas, they have an option, which is a path of least resistance, which could be a safer alternative route for them. And a lot of the sites Cumberland Farms does locate are at traffic signals too, so that provides safe access for people to access the sites. And one thing we find is most gasoline stations, nowadays the new models have the same offerings. Gasoline prices are pretty much the same, so there's not a major fight over, it's more complementary to the roadway. People are using this based on convenience. So the permitting process that we're involved with, if a site is moved forward, if it's found viable, we perform our full traffic impact study. And that study includes us getting traffic counts if it's an existing site, as well as identifying major study area intersections and doing traffic counts there during the peak periods, obtaining crash data. We look at future projections, making sure if there's any future roadway projects coming down the pipeline that we're aware of, any other major traffic generators. And then we look at a full analysis of all of these possible scenarios and to determine what the impacts, if any, are for this type of proposed development. And if required, we have recommended mitigation measures, such things as signal timing adjustments, signage striping improvements as well. So we do look at the full gamut. And throughout the process, we involve all stakeholders, local as well as the state, to make sure that they're on board, and they provide another level of review. Most of these sites for gas stations, they want to be located on an arterial because that's where the customers are traveling, that's where the volumes are. And they're all located on usually a state-owned roadway. So that provides the DOT a level of review to get involved, and the sites all have to be designed to their standards, such as with the driveway width, the driveway spacing, the location, the site distance, as well as they have the opportunity to review our traffic report as well as the proposed traffic operations. Overall, with a new site development, the primary goal is to provide safe and efficient site access and circulation. The new sites, you'll hear further, they're designed to provide adequate queuing on site for the gas pumps, as well as improved parking and circulation for pedestrians as well, pedestrian access. And they're also designed to accommodate the appropriate heavy vehicles, such as the fuel gas tanker truck that will need to circulate the site. And of course, there will be, a permit needed to be obtained with the DOT, and they have the option, the opportunity to make sure the site is designed appropriately and follows the state standards as well. And that concludes my overview, but if you need me to read the memo, I'm available if that's required.
Thank you. Matt Leidner?
Hi, good evening, Mayor, council members. Matt Leidner with Civil Design Group, 21 High Street, North Andover, Massachusetts. And I am a professional civil engineer. I have 19, going on 20 years shortly of experience in commercial site design and permitting with multiple retailers, including Cumberland Farms. And I am aware of the concerns that were raised in the opposition letter that is before you tonight. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide my professional opinion on those subject matters. And I will do my best to keep it concise. So one concern was raised relative to noise associated with the gas station use. And from my experience, there's nothing specific about a gas station that is noisier than other retail and commercial uses. One might say the delivery trucks create some noise when they're delivering supplies to the gas station, but that is not unlike most retailers and many other commercial uses. So there's nothing really that stands out about a gas station that I can point to that would create more noise than other uses on the other retail or commercial uses on this site. And so beyond that, what's before you tonight is really the separation distance between gas stations. And the deliveries and noise associated with the operation is something that would be vetted out during the planning and zoning approval process. But there's nothing about it that I can correlate to the separation between gas stations. Lighting was another concern in the letter that was submitted to the council opposing this change. And modern engineering practice regarding lighting design for retail sites, it employs two basic standards, and that is no light trespass or minimize light trespass. In other words, light from a specific site spilling over onto abutting sites, minimizing that, and also reducing or minimizing any upward lighting. Sometimes it's called dark skies. In other words, keeping all the light focused downward and not uplighting into the sky, which leads to light pollution. Some ways that we achieve that are what's called full cutoff fixtures. So the light fixtures themselves do not project any light above a 180-degree horizontal line. It only projects outward and downward. And then in specific areas of the site, if there's a light, for example, near an abutting property line, we add shields to the light, which further restrict that light from going outward. We also limit pole height, so the mounting height of the lights on the pole. The taller the poles, the more the light spreads out and can spill onto other properties. And then we also look not to overlight the site, right? We want to achieve a certain level of lighting depending on the use and the area of the site, but we don't want to overlight the site. So we go through this process and produce what's called a photometric plan, and it shows the light values throughout the site. It demonstrates that there's no light trespass spilling over beyond the property line. So this is typical of most site design. You know, the current practice is to produce these types of lighting plans, but beyond that, the zoning regulations actually require it. And they require full cutoff fixtures, they require no light trespass. So this is already addressed in the zoning regulations of the city. And so again, while this is an item that may come up during a planning and zoning review and approval process, there's nothing specific about the gas station use and furthermore about separation between gas stations that would, that I can correlate to light pollution. Fuel handling was another item that was brought up, and there were certain scenarios that were raised in the letter as far as being a potential worst-case scenario, given the volatility of gasoline. And what I can tell you about that is that the current regulations surrounding underground storage tanks and gasoline fuel storage and fueling facilities require a host of safety equipment and operating procedures to be put in place relative to a current day new gas station. So, and there's many examples of this, but I want to try to relate these to the specific items that were brought up in that opposition letter. So if, for example, if a driver were to fill their car up with gas, inadvertently leave the gas nozzle in their tank and drive away, the dispensers are built with what's called a breakaway connection. So the hose will actually just pull off the dispenser, and there's an automatic valve that will just shut the fuel off. So it won't lead to any fuel spillage. It's actually designed to do that. God forbid somebody were to drive into a dispenser and dislodge the dispenser off the concrete island that it sits on. There are what's called shear valves. So if the pipe actually shears off with the dispenser, then there's a valve that automatically shuts and shuts the flow of fuel off immediately. So again, there's no fuel spillage associated with that. It's actually designed to withstand that type of situation. Fuel unloading, so from the fuel tanker truck that's unloading into the storage tanks at the facility, there was a concern raised about the potential for drivers driving over the hose that leads from the truck to the tanks as they're putting the fuel into the tanks. And standard operating procedure with any gas stations that I've worked with are the driver would come, the fuel delivery driver would come to the site, they would cone the area off to prevent drivers from driving through there. And furthermore, modern engineering practice with designing gas stations is to put the fuel offloading position where the truck stops to unload the fuel, where the fuel ports are in the ground, where they put the fuel into the underground storage tanks, to keep that tucked as out of the way as possible. Keep it out of the main flow of traffic on site, and just keep it removed from the main operation to the extent that that is possible. And again, that minimizes the chance for a driver inadvertently driving over the hose. If there was a situation where that actually did happen, somebody went through the cones or disregarded the cones and was able to get to the hose, the other standard operating procedure in place is that the attendant who is delivering the fuel stands at the truck at the valve. So there's a series of valves on the truck that they can open and shut to regulate the fuel from the truck into the tanks. They stand at those valves at all times when the fuel is unloading. So if they were to see this about to occur, they could just shut that valve off, and that's what they would do. So there's many procedures and practices in place to avoid that type of situation. And I can't say that's never happened. I don't know, but in my experience, I've never heard of that happening. A driver running over the hose from the fuel truck. Aesthetics was another item that was brought up in the letter. I can tell you that reputable organizations like Cumberland Farms take pride in their architecture, their site design. They go to great lengths to develop a really nice site. We put together a landscaping plan as part of our standard design package, whether a municipality requires it or not. Architecturally speaking, as you can see in those photos there, the architecture is of the building. We like to say it's a New England farmhouse style building, so it takes elements from traditional New England farmhouse, and they use high-end aesthetic elements, architectural elements on the building. So there's dormers. The roof shingles are architectural shingles. There's a stone band along the bottom of the building. I'm having trouble seeing with the glare on those. But yes, you can see it in the bottom picture at least. So it goes about 4 feet up from the ground. It wraps the building. And the colors are mainly earth tones in their color scheme for the building. But not only that, they carry those elements through to the fueling canopy and also to the sign, the freestanding sign that they have. So in other words, the fueling canopy has a mansard roof, which means you can see a pitch to the roof, and those shingles match the building. That same stone on the building wraps the bottom of the columns around the fuel canopy. That same stone creates a planter around the sign. The colors all carry over from one element to another. So they really do go to great lengths to create a nice looking package and tie all the elements together from an architectural standpoint. So in closing, what I'd like to say is that most of these items that we covered are really not specific to gas stations. And for those that are, which is really the fueling matters that I spoke about, I cannot correlate those or relate those to separation between gas stations. So I don't see how these items relate to the distance between the gas stations. These are all items that will be reviewed under the planning and zoning process. My client, Cumberland Farms, is professional and thorough with regard to addressing these items on all sites during the planning and zoning review process. And, we look forward and hope to have the opportunity to bring a proposal forward in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again, I'm not sure whether this is in opposition or approve. Opposition, and you are Jeannie? It'll be next, not now. And then I also have Paul Agranovich. Are you opposed or approve? Okay, please come to the podium.
Mayor and council members, thanks for the opportunity to speak before you. My name is Paul Agranovich, and I live in New London. I'm wearing a couple of hats as I come before you at this particular time. As someone who's lived in this town for many, many years or worked here well over a half century, I go back in thinking about things, the downtown Norwich, I think it was Thursday nights, was so overwhelming with businesses being open, traffic, it was bustling, it was alive. And then the malls came, the Norwich Town Mall came, and the business went there. And that has since obviously had a sad demise, both the downtown as well as the malls. So looking at what was at one time and what is now, it's apparent that things have to be done here. So my first hat again now is just looking at things from a distant view. I think if this 1,000 feet is gotten rid of, and hopefully you'll certainly decide to do that, what has been mentioned, competition, and I know that I've been involved with retail competition for many years, and competition is very good. It really is. There are nights I stay up late because of it, but overall, it's a very good thing to have. And secondly, the tax base will certainly be improved. I dread the yearly getting the tax bills. The one source of getting income is taxes, and this particular project will certainly add to it. I don't think taxes will ever go down, but I think at least it will help to stabilize it and do it. The second hat that I'm wearing is for Universal Package Store, and we would be, if this project goes through, we would be part of this. frankly, because looking down the road, I wasn't sure what direction I would be taking in my life as far as how much longer I wanted to stay in retail. It's kind of revitalized me. It would give us a brand new store. We would have the ability to continue on offering people the same products and conduct business the way that I love doing it. I love business, but again, I'm not a kid anymore. So I think that having a very, very vibrant section of Norwich will bring people in, and I think that there's absolutely no negative things that can occur from this, and I certainly will again ask that you support this project. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? There are three, did you?
Excuse me, Mayor, I had a question for you. Bob Mills had asked that I read in his letter if it's not going to get read in.
I have it here, I'll take care of it, thank you.
Thank you.
There are three letters that were sent in favor of this ordinance. One is by Joseph P. Williams, Shippen and Goodwin. Another by Colleen Medeiros of McMahon, Transportation Engineers and Planners. And then I have a letter from Bob Mills, and you want me to read? And the clerk will read it for us. Okay, could you wait? Let us read the letter.
Okay, it's a letter from NCDC dated September 15, 2017. Dear City Council, I'm writing to express NCDC's support of the text amendment change for Section 6.3 of the Norwich zoning regulations in public hearing number 2. The current regulations prohibit gas stations from being located within 1,000 feet of each other, a regulation that for one reason or another has not been upheld elsewhere in the city. The site in question is actually a former gas station, so historically the proposed use for the property is identical to the most recent occupancy at the site. Approving this proposed text amendment change would facilitate the cleanup of a long vacant corner of a major gateway into the city at 680-684 West Main Street and 506 New London Turnpike. Additionally, it will support the needs of our citizens and visitors with a proposed Cumberland Farms while facilitating new investment and economic development. A basic principle of siting for gas, coffee, and convenience services is it is most common to have the morning and afternoon drive-side services available such that motorists do not have to cross the 4-lane road for their morning or afternoon needs. Left turns crossing Route 82 is a real safety issue already. This is a logical use of the property and should not increase safety concerns. Please help reduce the barriers to entry for the development in Norwich with a supporting vote. Sincerely submitted, Robert Mills, President, Norwich Community Development Corporation.
Sir, did you wish to speak? Please.
My name is Steve Cohen. I'm from Warwick, Rhode Island, and I'm the owner of the corner next to the Universal Package Store, 684 West Main Street. I purchased the property and had it in my possession for almost a year now for the main goal to make that corner look obviously much better than it is. I was going to speak of, most of the things I was going to speak about were actually in that letter that you just read, but I just wanted to vocalize my support for that corner. And the reason why I bought it was to, get rid of such a horrible looking corner as it sits today. So with that, I hope you'll vote in favor of the text amendment.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in approval? Anyone else wishing to speak in approval? Anyone else wishing to speak in approval? Hearing none, those wishing to speak in opposition, and I believe we first have Jeannie Savada. Yes. I'll go, you don't have to be on the list. I'll call out for those wishing to speak. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeannie Savada. I'm here on behalf of my parents, who are homeowners in Norwich.
Can you speak up? We can't hear you, please.
My name is Jeannie Savada. Can you hear me? I'm here on behalf of my parents. They asked me to come to read their letter to you as their Norwich residents.
And have you given us your address?
I live in Colchester, 297 Old Hebron Road, Colchester, Connecticut. My parents live at 107 Wauwekis Hill Road, Norwich, Connecticut.
Okay, thank you.
We own a home in Norwich at 107 Wauwekis Hill Road, and I'm writing you to voice my strong opposition to the proposed text amendment to zoning regulations submitted by Cumberland Farms. The existing regulations were put in place to protect us all and should not be changed on a whim simply because another gas station can't abide by our regulations. The traffic in our city has gotten much worse since the regulation was adopted, not better. Their high-paid attorneys will surely do their best to say it is somehow better to allow gasoline stations on every corner, and we'll all be better for it. Cumberland Farms states one of the reasons for changing the regulation is that we currently have gas stations closer than 1,000 feet from one another with no problems. Those stations existed prior to the adaptation of the separation requirement they seek to eliminate. They are called pre-existing non-conforming. If, in fact, one of these non-conforming stations closed and the use was abandoned, then the use would no longer be permitted. The intentions of the regulations are to eliminate non-conforming situations whenever possible for the good of all of us. By stating there are other locations in Norwich that are not in compliance, then using that as a reason to allow it everywhere is simply foolish. As we all know, Norwich has varying traffic patterns and congestion levels based on the location. The current regulation ensures some level of protection to the residents in the zones that allow gasoline stations. Furthermore, to say surrounding towns don't have the ordinance, with one exception, is a ridiculous comparison. The surrounding towns aren't Norwich or anything like Norwich, so why compare them? How about asking the question, what towns or cities have this regulation? If you do, you will find that other nearby towns and cities have them. Waterford, 1,500 feet. East Lyme, 1,500 feet. Stonington, 1,500 feet. New London, 500 feet. Killingly, 1,500 feet. There are many more, and it doesn't stop at state lines. It's abundantly clear that Cumberland Farms isn't concerned about our safety, or they would comply with our regulations and protect all of us from further congestion in close proximity to already busy areas. They're welcome to compete as long as they comply, like every other citizen in the city. Please don't be fooled by claims that it's good for the citizens and competition. It's about wanting what they want and changing the regulations so they can get it. I'm asking for your good judgment to uphold the regulation put in place to keep us all safe at your public hearing. Thank you for your time and attention. William and Charlotte Wildowski.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Sir, did you want to speak? Yes. In opposition?
Good evening, Mayor Hinchey, members of the council. My name is Harry Heller. I'm an attorney with an office at 736 Route 32 in Uncasville, and I am here this evening representing Savin Gasoline Properties LLC and Savin Gasoline Properties Roman numeral 2 LLC and Hendel's 565 West Main LLC, all owners of property in the city of Norwich. The application which is before you for consideration is an application to amend Section 6.3 of Ordinance 1721, which was adopted by the Council in October of 2015, less than 2 years ago. In acting upon a text amendment, you must make a determination that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which is embodied in your zoning regulations and your zoning map, and you must also take into consideration the recommendations of the Municipal Plan of Conservation and Development. We submit to you that the proposal is neither consistent with the comprehensive plan, nor is it consistent with the recommendations contained in your Municipal Plan of Conservation and Development. The Plan of Conservation and Development was enacted by the Commission on the City Plan in September of 2013, and one of the charges in the Plan of Conservation and Development was a comprehensive revision of the zoning regulations, which the City Council enacted 2 years later. The language which is proposed for modification before you this evening is part of a long-standing ordinance in the City of Norwich. Section 6.3 was incorporated into the zoning ordinance in May of 1968, so it's been in place for nearly 50 years. In adopting the ordinance in May of '68, your council stated, "Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Norwich, in the interest of public safety, control of traffic, and the protection of the public using the streets and highways of the City of Norwich, Chapter 7 of the zoning ordinance of the City of Norwich is amended as follows," and then incorporated the language which is before you for consideration this evening. So when your predecessors adopted the ordinance, public safety was the initiative that proposed the consideration of that ordinance. In 2003, the Connecticut legislature amended sections 1452 and 14321 of the general statutes and eliminated section 14322. It is claimed in the presentation by the applicant before you this evening that the thrust of the regulation which you're being asked to consider is to bring the Norwich ordinance into conformity with state statutes. We submit to you that that is simply not the case. 14322 never had any separating distance between gasoline filling stations in the regulation. It had a broader enumeration of the considerations which are made by the local authority in enacting or in performing the function of the local authority determining a suitability of location than that currently contained in 14321, which contains no standards at all. But the legislative history of the debate before the Senate and the General Assembly in modifying those provisions in 2003 is instructive. In proposing the bill before the Senate, Senator Fonfara stated, "It streamlines the provisions for applying for certain applications involving dealers, repairers, recyclers, and gasoline stations so that everything would go before the Zoning Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, or other authority designated within a municipality." In the debate before the House, Representative Wallace stated, "Secondly, it removes zoning boards of appeals as a permit agency for gas station recycling sites, auto repair shops, and places responsibility more appropriately with Zoning Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, or the Board of Authority as provided by local regulations or ordinance. He further states, "Thank you, Madam Speaker. This clarifies that the local authority is the other board or authority designated by local charter regulation or ordinances and ensures that it's not confused with the local traffic authority." Representative Stone asked for clarification on the floor. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just one other question. What I had envisioned in the bill that I originally submitted to the committee, and just for clarification purposes, is that where an owner or a lessee of a piece of commercial property wants to construct and operate either a site for the sale or repair of motor vehicles or a gasoline station, where that person has to get a special permit or special exception from the local zoning authority pursuant to the local zoning ordinance, that in and of itself could also serve as the vehicle, the mechanism for which to obtain the site location approval required under Title 14 of our general statutes. Is that a true statement? He further states, this would enable the applicant to go to just one commission in order to get approval, not only the local zoning ordinances, therefore local approval, but also to get their Title 14 state location approval through that one commission. And I thank the gentleman for his responses. And again, the goal here was to streamline the application process where either one commission or another had dealt with the same issues that would be considered as part of a site location approval under Title 14. This enables the applicant to, in effect, one-stop shop, so to speak, so there's only one commission to deal with. All the same criteria, conditions, and considerations would apply regardless of which commission or board the applicant went to, and all the concerns that might come about from an application, either concerns of neighbors, concerns of other businesses, or concerns of the municipality would still be addressed. So there was no discussion whatsoever in the 2003 amendments to change any of the substantive requirements for a certificate of location approval. In fact, in his treatise on Connecticut zoning and land use, Judge Fuller states, the repeal of 14.322, presumably because those criteria would be evaluated through the special permit process. The Commission acts as an agent for the state in passing on such applications and considered as required by General Statute Section 14.322, which has since been repealed, whether the location is suitable after considering, and this is the language that was in the original statute, the proximity of schools, churches, theaters, or playhouses, and other places of public gathering, intersecting streets, traffic conditions, width of highway, and effect on public travel, and determines that the use of the proposed location will not imperil the public safety. Presumably, these are still proper considerations in reviewing an application. So again, the legislature in the 2003 amendments only streamlined the application process for obtaining a certificate of location approval so that there was not a duplicative process in both obtaining that certificate of location approval and obtaining site plan or special permit approval, whatever may be required by the local ordinance. It did not intend to substantively change the public safety considerations to be determined by the local authority in evaluating an application for a certificate of location approval or the criteria to be applied to that consideration. In the presentation which was made by the applicant before you this evening, there was much talk about the intersection of New London Turnpike and West Main Street and the proposed Cumberland Farms facility which the applicant desires to construct at that location. This is not a site-specific application. This is an application for you in your legislative authority to change a zoning ordinance of the City of Norwich. It bears no relation to Cumberland Farms. It bears no relation to the intersection of New London Turnpike and West Main Street. It is a proposal of general application which will apply to the siting of a new gasoline station anywhere in the City of Norwich. And it must be considered in that vein by you as the legislative zoning authority of the City of Norwich in deliberating on this application and determining whether or not this ordinance is good for the City of Norwich on a citywide basis and not with respect to this particular location or to Cumberland Farms. This matter was referred, as required by law, to the Commission on the City Plan for comment and recommendation. Before the deliberation by the Commission on the City Plan, I, on behalf of my clients, requested to speak and present evidence at that proceeding. We were denied that opportunity. The Commission on the City Plan was only privy to the applicant's submission and the information provided by the city planner in finding consistency of the application with the 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development. It is telling that the vote of the Commission on the City Plan was 4-1 to recommend a favorable action by the council. The one dissenting vote was the former city planner of the City of Norwich and who continues to be a municipal planner in the state of Connecticut, who had the professional capability to evaluate both the rationale for the 1968 adoption of the ordinance and the continuing public safety criteria which justifies the continuation of this ordinance in effect. In reviewing the language which has been submitted by the applicant for consideration, you will note that they propose eliminating the 1,000-foot separating distance for gasoline filling stations, but oddly enough, do not propose eliminating a separating distance for motor vehicle repair facilities. On behalf of the applicant, we will have a presentation this evening by David Spear, who is a licensed professional engineer specializing in traffic, who will talk about not only trip generation, which the applicant addressed, but also access management along the busy highways and streets in the City of Norwich and the impact that turning movements have on traffic management within those corridors. Based on his presentation, I would submit to you that gasoline filling stations, which in 1968 were customarily part of a repair operation, but are no longer so, and are now coupled with large-scale convenience store operations, are much, much higher trip generators than their predecessors, and that the separating distance requirement contained in the ordinance is founded in traffic safety to eliminate not trips within the corridor, because we concede most of the trips going to a gasoline convenience store facility are pass-by trips. The trip generation is not the issue. It's the turning movements and the potentially conflicting turning movements, which are the traffic safety issue, which is the foundation of this regulation. As indicated in the letter that was read into the record before my presentation this evening, several of the local communities, as contained in the applicant's letter of support, do not have separating distances. When you consider the demographics of Preston, of Salem, of small rural communities like that that are referenced in the letter, they do not have the traffic management considerations that are applicable in Norwich. When you look at communities that do have separating distances, you'll find that their characteristics are much more similar to those in the city of Norwich. Waterford, Killingly, East Lyme, Stonington. Those communities have found it prudent, in order to enhance public safety within the corridors in their communities, to require minimum separating distances between gasoline filling stations because of the potential public safety concerns.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, point of order.
Yes?
At the beginning of the public hearing, you indicated that there would be a 3-minute limit for people speaking in favor and people speaking in opposition. Are we not following that this
No,
evening?
not when it comes to zoning matters. There is no limit. But thank you for bringing it up.
The letter in support of the application references the fact that there are several gas stations in Norwich that are currently located in closer proximity to each other than 1,000 feet. These are validly existing non-conforming uses, and they are protected by statute. But the goal of zoning is, over time, to eliminate non-conforming uses. So the fact that nonconformities currently exist does not justify eliminating a regulation which has been in existence for nearly 50 years, which is founded in the public safety of the residents of Norwich and public safety of the motoring public on Norwich and state highways located within your municipality. I had submitted a letter dated August 11, 2017, which I would like to introduce into the record of this proceeding. Is it necessary for me to bore you by reading this into the record?
Corporation Counsel says no.
Okay. But I would ask you to read my letter in opposition before voting on this application, to consider the public safety and neighborhood concerns, which are the basis for municipalities adopting separating distances and separating distance requirements between gasoline filling stations, not only in Norwich and many other Connecticut communities, but throughout the country. This is not an issue of free competition. This is not an issue of economic development. This is an issue concerning public safety. And we would submit to you that the rationale which motivated your predecessors to adopt this regulation many years ago is even more relevant today than it was at that time, based upon the way that the use has developed from a gasoline repair facility to a gasoline convenience facility, based on the change in traffic volume on your busy streets, West Main Street, West Town Street, Route 32, Route 2, which are locations where a gasoline filling station is more likely to locate, and that this regulation has more validity today than it did at the time of its adoption. The applicant indicated that the proposal does no harm. We would submit to you that there is the potential for great harm by permitting a proliferation of these types of uses in closer proximity to each other on busy streets where you have conflicting vehicle turning movements, and that is the very reason why many municipalities have required minimum separating distances between gasoline stations. They talked about the revitalization of an important gateway to Norwich. Well, you can't consider that. This is a community-wide regulation. It could apply anywhere in the city of Norwich where you have a zoning district which allows a gasoline station to be located, and it could be proposed by anyone, not just Cumberland Farms. They argue that it promotes competition and economic development. There is nothing inherent in the regulation itself which is anti-competitive or anti-economic development. There are many locations within the city which are zoned appropriately for the siting of a gasoline filling station, which can comply with the current requirements of Section 6.3 of the zoning ordinance. We submit to you that the regulation is founded in sound principles, that it protects those residents of the city of Norwich and the motoring public in the city of Norwich, and that you, as the legislative authority in your charge, are empowered to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the city of Norwich through the zoning process. Section 6.3 of the ordinance accomplishes that, and we would urge the council to deny the application and leave this ordinance of long standing in place. At this time, I would like to introduce David Spear, who is our professional engineer who has prepared a report which he would like to submit into the record. And I would just also, in closing, like to mention a couple of elements of the Plan of Conservation and Development from the strategic element that was adopted in 2013. The Commission on the City Plan stated the strategic element outlines a long-term vision for the City of Norwich and programs to help achieve that vision. This plan is a continuation of the city's long tradition of planning for and guiding the physical, economic, and social development of the community. It, under fundamental planning principles, grow strategically. Norwich will be best able to capitalize on opportunities that present themselves if it focuses on growing strategically, directing development towards nodes areas with the infrastructure to support it, promoting appropriate development patterns. Norwich will be a successful community if it maintains and enhances the quality of life of its residents, providing safe, reliable, and economic transportation choices. Page 27, support economic development. Economic development is important to the overall development and economic health of the city and to its residents. This includes retaining and supporting the businesses in Norwich today and attracting new business development in the future. It also includes attracting land uses and activities which provide meaningful employment and which provide more in municipal revenue than they require in municipal services. Under the section Address Transportation and Mobility Needs, the livability of a place is affected by the ability of people to get where they need to be and by having a variety of transportation options available. The design of the transportation system is also a key consideration. Since many people acquire their perception of the character of an area based on what they see from the roadway, Norwich must be careful to ensure that the design of the transportation system, especially roadways, is appropriate for the areas outside of the traveled way. Under strategies, provide for the transportation mobility needs of the community. Provide for a balanced transportation system which addresses pedestrian needs, bicycle needs, vehicular needs, and transit needs. Address specific roadway needs. Although a primary goal is to establish and maintain a balanced transportation system, there are some specific roadway needs to be addressed. Address issues along Route 82. Reduce the number of driveway and traffic conflicts. Provide turning lanes, sidewalk, bike routes, street trees, and bus shelters. Those types of concerns are compromised by the regulation that you are being asked to consider this evening. And it is therefore not in conformance with your plan of conservation and development. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Spear.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, madam, I need to be excused for a moment or two.
Is a 5-minute recess appropriate? Could you stop her for just 1 second? Would 5 minutes be okay? We'll take a 5-minute recess so that everyone can hear your discussion.
Because this is when they changed. This is when they changed. This is dated.
Right, that's 2013.
This is 13. But then they changed the whole thing in 2015. Why?
Willis Scholarship account. Again, this is
I would ask everyone to please, so we can reconvene. Sir, please.
For the record, my name is David Spear. I'm the principal engineer with DLS Traffic Engineering, LLC. My office is at 14 Bent Road in Windsor, Connecticut. I've been doing traffic engineering in Connecticut for over 30 years, and we were asked to take a look at the proposed zoning text change amendment with regard to some of the traffic-related issues. And I believe you all have a copy of my letter with comments. My understanding is that the proposed text amendment is to eliminate an existing 1,000-foot separation requirement between gasoline service stations that currently exists in the regulations, and to eliminate a public hearing requirement for gasoline station location permit requests. In my review, I looked at several documents. I looked at the Journal of the Council of the City of Norwich, which was published in May 1968. I looked at the current zoning regulations, City of Norwich, from the comprehensive plan, which is effective November 2015. We looked at the proposed zoning text amendment prepared by and for Cumberland Farms, dated 27 July 2017. I also reviewed some access management considerations and an overview written and prepared by Christine Williams, a certified planner, and Herb Levinson, who's a PE well-known in Connecticut. And we looked at the Norwich 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development. And we also looked at some preliminary plans from the Connecticut DOT and also the City of Norwich for Concept Plan 103, TMP1, safety and operational improvements on the Route 82 corridor. The zoning regulations initially implemented regarding the 1,000-foot spacing requirement were laid out in 1968. And the reason being for given at that time for the implementation of the spacing was in the interest of public safety, protection of the public using the streets and highways in the City of Norwich. And the reason that is beneficial and was beneficial back in that day was because it helps to reduce the number of conflict points. Anytime you have an intersection and a driveway intersection with an arterial road, you create conflict points. So if you have a T intersection, that creates 6 conflict points. Every point where a vehicle diverges from an existing pattern and crosses the path of an opposing vehicle is a conflict point. So a T intersection has 6 conflict points. A 4-way intersection has 12 conflict points. And the more driveways you have along an arterial, the more conflict points you have. The idea of access management is to reduce and combine driveways and reduce access points to combine conflict points so you have less in number, and to separate the location of conflict areas. So by having 1,000-foot spacing between gas stations, you're spacing out the location of the conflict points. The proposed text change is very valid today. I have in my letter a comparison, and a lot of the issues here have been discussed already, but I want to go over the comparison of the typical gasoline station from say, the 1968 era to the current modern gasoline filling stations. The summary table I have in my letter shows a 12 fueling position. The gas station's trip generation estimates, according to the Institute of Transportation Engineers, is based on the number of fueling positions and also the square footage of the convenience store in a convenience store case. But the land use 944 is a typical gas station with a service facility, which would have repair service bays where you would have 2 or 3 service bays, and you would have a number of fueling positions, and you would have a small cashier area for the collection of the money. And those type of facilities for a 12 fueling position facility with, say, 3 service bays generates about 146 trips, 150 trips. That's 75 vehicles. A trip is a one-way movement entering or exiting the facility. So you're talking about 75 vehicles, which is 150 trips. Now those trips are granted. The gasoline use and convenience store is taking the majority of their traffic from the existing travel stream, but the movements in and out of the driveways are actual trips, so that if you move 75 vehicles on and off the site, you added 150 turning movements to the driveway. So you add 150 right turns in, 150 right turns out. If they're doing the reverse movement, you may be adding 50 left turns in and 50 left turns out. So you're adding movements to the driveway, and you're adding conflict points, and you're adding traffic. The other thing that's interesting about the gas station facilities, a lot of them are located at signals or at busy intersections, so that typically they'll have 2 driveways on the side street and 2 driveways on the main street. So the first driveway is often in the middle of the queue from the signal. So when the signal processes cars, you get a red light and a green light. So when the light turns red, the queuing will back up away from the signal. So the first driveway often is in the middle of the queuing area, so that you have vehicles turning in and out of the queues, which is also a safety issue. So that being said, the driveway traffic from a gas station is an intense use, although it may not be adding 150 new trips to the area. It's adding congestion and turning movements and driveway volumes. So when you compare that to a 12 fueling position facility with a 3,000 square foot convenience store, which is typical of a more modern gas station, when you convert the service bays into a convenience store, a lot of facilities, they'll just take out the original building and put in a new store, a new building. That facility generates about 246 trips. So you're talking about 125 vehicles in and out, which is 250 trips. And what you have today is there's even newer facilities which are not even really into the IDE trip generation database yet, is the super convenience store gas station, which a 12 fueling station with a 3,000 square foot super convenience store. And a lot of these stores sell food, and some of them have drive-through windows. Those facilities generate even more traffic, and those are generating about 430 trips, which is 215 vehicles. So those driveway volumes are substantial, and they're adding substantial congestion to the intersections. So by spacing, the spacing requirement of 1,000 feet helps you to space out the conflict points and helps you to reduce the conflict areas, to space the conflict areas and provide safer travel patterns. And one thing that was noted earlier was the numbers of driveways on Route 82, for example. The state of Connecticut and the city of Norwich has identified that as an area with an excessive number of driveways. And the initial idea of the state was to put in a raised median for access management to eliminate a lot of the turning movements and conflict points and combine access to various facilities. And in addition to that, there's been discussion of rotaries in series, which would also tend to provide access management and improve safety and reduce conflict points. So it has been targeted as one of the key areas in the state where this access management is very appropriate and beneficial. So after looking at the various issues regarding the traffic aspects of this zone text change, it's the professional opinion of DLS Traffic Engineering that the zoning regulations as they currently exist should remain, and they should not be amended as proposed. With regard to the public hearing, I believe that the public hearing process, even if it's two different bodies doing the public hearing, that it provides good and additional information in the location of a gasoline filling station, and that all public information is helpful and beneficial to the location of a filling station. Those should also be kept. So I would like to turn the discussion over to John McNeil.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I'll try not to wear you down. I'll try to be as quick as I can. I submitted a little narrative that I think is very important for all of you to consider. My name is John McNeil. I live at 424 Cherry Lane in Oakdale. I work for Alden Associates. They own the mobile station at 489 New London Turnpike. I'm here to speak in opposition to the proposed text amendment change requested by Cumberland Farms. First, I need to state that I'm not simply just an employee of a business which will be negatively impacted if this text amendment should pass. I was born in this city. I graduated from Norwich Tech. I've been doing business with the Planning and Zoning Department here for over 30 years. Heck, my family even owned the farm where BOCC and McDonald's is before the highway came in. My wife was from Norwich. We were married in St. Pat's. I tell you this so you understand that I'm not just a corporate out-of-towner with no personal connection to the city. I even built that station. I would like to illuminate the root cause of why we're all discussing this text amendment change. I wrote this yesterday, not realizing that we were going to be focusing on one site, because this is a citywide text amendment, but I don't need to illuminate it as much, but I wrote. I want my comments to be put into the record. I'd like to illuminate the root cause of why we're here discussing this amendment change. It's very important to understand the strategy of Cumberland Farms is using to develop at a specific location in the city. That location is 684 West Main, which is located at the same intersection as East Great Plains Fire Department is located at. The location is an abandoned gasoline station and repair facility that Hendel's Petroleum once owned about 13 years ago. Hendel sold the site to Brooks Pharmacy, who planned on putting a pharmacy at the location, but their plans changed. They were bought out by another pharmacy retailer whose plan did not include development at that site. That site was put up for sale, and since then, and the gasoline use was abandoned 13 years ago, it was no longer allowed due to its proximity to other gasoline stations. A year ago or more, a developer named Mr. Cohen put a deposit on 684 West Main with intentions to develop the site with another gasoline station. I can only assume he did his due diligence and knew the restrictions. The major problem he had to overcome was that the site was clearly abandoned and he had to remove the obstacle to accomplish his goal. He applied for a zoning permit and was denied based on the ZEO's abandonment determination. Subsequently, he appealed the decision to the Zoning Board of Appeals and asked them to overturn the ZEO's decision. The ZEO overturned the Zoning Board of Appeals overturned the zoning enforcement officer's decision without the pertinent facts. It should be noted that the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals was opposed to the decision. It was discovered that this decision was made by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and an appeal was taken on that decision and is currently in litigation. In the meanwhile, the property was purchased jointly by two parties, one from Florida and another one from Hawaii, for $550,000 in May of this year. I believe their level of confidence is very high, since they paid over $500,000 for a site with an abandoned site. And I assume they have a backup development plan, so something will replace the closed, abandoned gasoline station. A text amendment proposal suddenly appeared on a town council meeting on August 7, 2017, requesting the separation distance be abolished. What a surprise. When the town manager gave his report at that council meeting on August 7, 2017, he mentioned he attended a meeting with Cumberland Farms. It's no secret that Cumberland Farms has been involved in this process from the early stages. If this amendment were to be approved, Cumberland Farms would be allowed to be at the location they desire. Cumberland Farms would receive another benefit by the elimination of this 1,000-foot separation requirement. The existing location that is in question, that really is not supposed to be the main item here, is pre-existing non-conforming. If that site were allowed to be reused as a gasoline facility, it couldn't be expanded, because that would be expanding a non-conforming use. So basically they would be confined to the facility's current footprint. They need to expand it into the adjacent property, which you heard spoke of tonight. Seeking to oppose the text change, Attorney Heller wrote a letter to the chairman of the commission of the city plan requesting to present certain facts that they should consider when discussing the amendment on their meeting on August 15, 2017. The letter was intercepted by the city planner, Deanna Rhodes, who in turn contacted the chairman, Arthur Sharon, who discussed the communication. They decided they would not allow it to be read or considered at their meeting. The document was forwarded to the city council by Deanna Rhodes and never mentioned at the commission on the city plan meeting. I attended the meeting along with Attorney Heller to be sure that if called upon, we would be prepared. We were not called upon, and no mention was made of the correspondence. It was very telling to see how Deanna Rhodes presented the amendment to the members. She spoke only positive, and at one point she said there were no safety concerns with the proposed amendment. She completely disregarded the facts that Attorney Heller's letters touched on. Of course, she had to have read the letter, otherwise she could not have made a determination as to whether or not it should be read at the meeting. She clearly desired an outcome, otherwise she would have been more objective and provided opposing facts. It should be noted that one of the commission members, Kathy Warzika, who was perhaps the person in that room with the most experience in planning for Norwich, opposed the text change. While attending the meeting on the commission plan on August 15th and witnessing the unusual way the text amendment proposal was handled, it was clear to me that an investigation into the relationship between the planner and the applicant may shed light on the situation. A FOIA request was mailed to the planner, the city manager, the mayor, the chairman of the commission on the city plan on August 22nd. The mayor acknowledged receipt on August 28th. I assume the other parties received them the same day. The city manager also acknowledged receipt in writing. The planner called and acknowledged receipt. The only person who complied with the request and provided the documents was the mayor. Therefore, we submitted 3 Freedom of Information appeals. We were not provided with the requested information prior to this public hearing, so we couldn't appropriately prepare. So the only person that provided the information to date was the mayor. I personally have been involved for zoning matters for over 30 years from both sides. I'm currently the chairman of the Montville Zoning Board of Appeals and have been for over 15 years, and have never seen such a disregard for communication receipt. Furthermore, I have never seen a planner show apparent bias and, as a result, did not reach out to others who would be adversely affected. It should be pointed out that Cumberland Farms built a new large facility in Portland, Connecticut in 2014. The Portland planner at that time was Deanna Rhodes. There are too many unanswered questions as to the relationship to the planner and Cumberland Farms and how the decisions were handled internally. I do not feel it's the planner's place to assist an applicant in circumventing the zoning regulations that affect the entire city, and feel the city must investigate the matter to determine if any wrongdoing has occurred. I don't believe anyone has pointed out how non-restrictive the existing separation distance is, so let me explain. I analyzed the zoning map and identified the locations where gasoline stations could be constructed through the special permit process. These locations are along mostly the main roadways, we all know them, and the total length through these zones exceeds 81,000 feet. If gasoline stations were built exactly 1,000 feet apart, you do the math, that's 81 locations. There are approximately 16 operating gasoline stations. It's abundantly clear that there are many other opportunities to install gasoline stations while abiding by the existing regulations. I'm aware that you can't put a gas station in a body of water or on an intersection, but clearly there's many other locations. There is no need to change the existing regulations for one company's desire to fulfill their goal. Why would the City of Norwich change the rules for the benefit of one business that will affect every other one? I don't believe this should ever have made it to the Council for consideration. It should have been rejected. Sincerely me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
Good evening, members of the City Council, Mayor. Paul Garrity, I represent Global Partners LP, which is a service station provider in the City of Norwich on West Town Street. My office is at 38 Granite Street, New London, Connecticut. I'm going to be brief because Attorney Heller has covered a number of the topics that are of concern and that this commission should consider. I submitted a letter that outlines in a little bit more detail our position on this, but as we do oppose it, I want to really address three topics in here, and that is the legislative history that it was involved in the repeal of 14-322. It's attached to the correspondence that I provided, but all that statute, or all that repeal did was to eliminate a two-step process that the state had imposed upon repairers and dealers and gas stations in order to go get your siting approval first and then come back to the state again, and then you have to go get your zoning approval. In the legislative history, Representative Wallace, when asked the question about what the change would be at the municipal level, responded as follows. Thank you. Through you, Madam Speaker, this bill does not change whatever your municipality has been doing, assuming that it has conformed with the current law. There is a implied link in the letter that counsel for the applicant submitted that somehow in all of the legislative history for this 14-322 that this 1,000-foot separation distance was in there, and then somehow the legislature intended that towns could abolish that. It's clear from the comment by Representative Wallace that he's saying that towns can continue and should continue to go about their business. And this town saw fit back in the 60s, after a number of lengthy hearings on the issue, to impose the 1,000-foot requirement on that. And we believe that it should still say. The reason for that is probably even more apparent and abundant today because of the sheer growth of the city. The stations over in West Town, they are within 1,000 feet of each other. They're all non-conforming pre-existing uses. So that is something that's not likely to change unless one of them closes down. You also have the issue where we're talking about competition. There's plenty of competition in Norwich for gas already. And in addition to that, the fact that this location that the applicant is seeking to get for is across the street isn't the issue. As Attorney Heller said, this is a citywide issue. And when you look at it as a citywide issue, you realize that unlike what the applicant said, where it will foster fair competition, which means or implies that there's unfair competition going on right now, there's nothing of the sort, because there are many, many sites elsewhere in the city where service stations could be developed and still allow for adequate competition on that. So I would submit tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that this application should be denied because it is really focusing on one specific site in here, and that's not what you need to be considering. You're acting in a legislative capacity tonight, and you need to look at the larger impact that this will have throughout the city of Norwich. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Then could you read those two letters in, please?
Okay, this letter was submitted today at 9:13. It's dated September 13, 2017. Dear City Council, I am not able to attend your hearing on September 18th, and I would appreciate you reading my letter of concern on your change to the gas station ordinance. I own and live on 11 Country Drive, which is directly off of Route 82 in Norwich. The traffic is horrible, to put it mildly. We have a new gas station up the street in Basra and several in the other direction. My children and I feel intimidated already when driving on this already overdeveloped, unsafe roadway. I understand it's so bad that the state wants to put in roundabout, this is handwritten, I'm sorry, roundabout thing to improve safety. I beg of you to keep the law the way it is so we can minimize the congestion and keep our kids safe. As this can
As the law intended.
As the law intended, thank you, intended. More congestion would increase danger. Please put our safety first, not some pushy company that doesn't have to deal with driving nightmares. Thank you, Lauren Costello. And then I have a letter that was just submitted this evening, 9/18. My name is Gary Coley, and I live at 43 Everett Street, Norwich, Connecticut. I read an article in the Norwich Bulletin this past weekend about Cumberland Farms wanting to change an ordinance so they can build another gas station where one is currently empty at 684 West Main Street. I operate a small business in Norwich, and my travels take me on that roadway daily. Please tell me you're not seriously considering their proposal to allow another gas station to be installed on that intersection. That roadway is perhaps the most dangerous in the city, and another gas station there has to be one of the dumbest ideas I've heard lately. There must be a better use for that property. According to the article, someone just purchased it for $550,000. Do they already have some guarantees or approvals? It's very odd that someone who would spend that kind of money on something if you weren't sure what was going to be approved. If they can't get the ordinance changed, they will have to come up with a better plan for the property. Please don't make a decision based on anything other than safety. Safety should be the first and last reason to keep the ordinance as it is. Please deny the text amendment change. It's the least you can do to keep us safe. Sincerely, Gary Coley.
At this time, is there any rebuttals?
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, Attorney Joe Williams. We've been at this for some time, and I know the council has a busy agenda after this. So I'll try to just make a few brief points. I'm not going to try to respond to everything everybody said to you in opposition, and that includes the comments by Mr. McNeil about the process here. I think many of which comments were speculative and baseless and frankly inappropriate, so I'm not going to go further into those. But I would submit to you that the motivated opposition you heard from businesses that operate gas stations in Norwich underscores the need for competition. First people you heard from is the representative of the business that owns a gas station across the intersection from Cumberland Farms. And the question that they didn't answer that I hope you all had at the forefront of your minds is, why don't they want competition? Why are they so afraid of it? Why are they firmly opposed to it? And I think a fair response to that question is because the consumer is not being put first in that conversation. And that's what amending the zoning regulation will allow, for modern, well-engineered proposals to come before the City Plan Commission to be looked at. And that's all you're allowing, is a proposal to come forward. You're not blessing any particular development or any particular site. You're just allowing it to be reviewed, whereas it can't come before you right now because of the separation requirement. It was pointed out that that separation requirement was adopted in 1968, which was obviously a different time. Gas stations were very different. Many of them had repair facilities. What's not different, though, is, as Attorney Heller pointed out, the focus on that of the council in adopting that amendment was on public safety. And that's exactly what I pointed out to you. Our amendment was careful to maintain and to keep in the regulation that in looking at a location approval, the City Plan Commission will still look at whether the location is suitable and whether it is consistent with public safety to have a new gas station at that location. And as I said, you also have to get a special permit. And maybe you're familiar with it, but these regulations for a special permit, which we're not asking to amend, have a number of factors that the City Plan Commission has to look at, and they include, is the location suitable? Is it in harmony with the neighborhood and surrounding properties and their orderly development? And is the traffic generation that would come from the proposal safe? And are the roadways and the intersections around that site adequate? So all those things will be reviewed in detail. So that's still in there. All you're doing really is increasing the discretion and the flexibility of the City Plan Commission to look at those things on a particular application. But again, all the special permit factors are still on the table. The commission would have to hold a public hearing, and any applicant would have to prove compliance with them, just like they do today. One important point I heard was Attorney Heller and Mr. Spear conceded that most of the trips to a gas station are pass-by in nature. You've heard a lot about that tonight, meaning they're already on the road. So most of the business to a gas station is not traffic that's being generated that's new to the road. It's the people that are there already. And you know that in your everyday experience. When you get gas, when you realize you need it, you're driving by and you see who's easy to get into and who has a good price, right? So that's what the traffic is. Now, the point was then made that the trip generation is not the issue, it's the turning movements that are the issue. Okay, well, if that's an issue on a particular site, as Colleen Medeiros told you, there'll be a full traffic study. That location will be reviewed in detail. You likely will have to go before the state DOT or maybe the State Traffic Commission if you're on a state highway. And you have to prove all of those things to the Zoning Commission. You have to look at, are there turning movement problems? But I would add that, as Colleen pointed out and as Bob Mills in his letter pointed out, actually by adding more options and maybe adding a gas station across the street from another gas station, you're increasing people's options. You're actually improving safety, because that's less people that might make a left turn movement across more lanes of traffic to get into a gas station, because maybe they have another option they can turn right into. So by allowing this amendment, you'll give the business world an opportunity to potentially create more options for people that will create less conflicts, less turning movement conflicts, less left turns. The concern was also discussed about driveways and curb cuts near the intersection, and this is contained in Colleen's memo, but as is often the case, Cumberland Farms will look at a site like the one we've talked about. Often it combines several parcels, and our design team goes out of their way actually to reduce the number of curb cuts, and always to try to move the driveways, the curb cut, further away from the intersection. And the state, even if we don't do that, and even if the city didn't require it, the state DOT will. And we often have more requirements when we go before DOT even than we had before the town. So all those issues are looked at, and it's always thought about up front in the design process. What can we do to reduce the number of those driveways and the proximity to the intersection? But again, we can't even have that conversation. We can't even show the information to the city unless you amend the text and let us go forward with it. And last, on that issue about potential conflicts. Wouldn't that be true for any new business? Whether it was a pharmacy or whoever it was that wanted to develop this intersection, any new business generates more traffic, of course, or else the business model wouldn't be sufficient for somebody to want to invest in the property. So they're going to have more traffic, and of course that creates potential turning movement conflicts with anybody who's across the intersection. That's true at every intersection. That's true for any development project. The question then becomes, is it a problem on that site, and what are you doing about it? And that's what the traffic study does that would come forward to you if and when the text amendment is granted. That's all I wanted to say about it. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. We are about to close this public hearing. Is there anyone on the council who wishes to ask any questions of any of the speakers? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I'd like to speak to our planner, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening.
Evening.
How can I help you?
It has been stated that information was not permitted to go before the Commission on a City Plan. Could you please discuss that with us?
Absolutely. So when a referral is made to the council, to the Commission on the City Plan, it is not a public hearing. We have to be careful to ensure that everything is treated fairly in front of the Commission on the City Plan. So the applicant, as well as the opposing party, had submitted information and said, can we speak in front of the Commission on the City Plan as they do their referral? And the decision was no. It has never been a policy in any of the communities I've worked for. When you have a referral, it is not a public hearing. It is something from your board to their board directly. It's an internal discussion, and public can sit there and watch, but there's a public hearing process, and the public hearing process is here, not at the CCP. So they were both shared the information of, no, you will not be able to speak at that meeting. You can come and you can hear what the discussion is, but we're looking at the merits of the application in front of them, which is the exact same application that you had. I review it in reference to the plan, and then we share and talk about it and say, where is their support in the plan? And that's what I talk with them about. So it's just a normal procedure. It's not anything specific to this application. It's just a fair way to deal with things. It's a referral from the City Council to the CCP. It's not a public hearing. This is the venue for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further? Yes?
One question to Attorney Heller, please. And I just want to look at I'm sorry, we've got a tremendous amount of paperwork up here. In the opening of your letter dated August 11th, you say, please be advised that his office represents Savin Gasoline Properties, LLC, Savin Gasoline Properties 2, LLC, and Hendel's 565 West Main Street, LLC, all owners of real property. Now, I know that there are 4 gentlemen here sitting with you this evening, and I'm guessing they all don't own one gasoline station here in the city of Norwich. How many gasoline stations are we talking about in the city of Norwich that are owned by Savin, LLC, Savin 2, and Hendel's 565 West Main Street?
One each.
One?
No. The other one is owned by a different company. One each.
Thank you.
And I need to respond to Mr. Nystrom's question because there is no consistent procedure before the Commission on the City Plan. That evening, on the very application before ours, the one that you heard this evening on the appropriation for the golf course, representatives of the golf course were allowed to speak and address questions to the Commission. So I concede that neither the applicant nor my team was allowed to address the Commission on the City Plan, but from my observation that evening, that is not a consistent procedure that is followed.
Okay. Oh, we have more questions. Mr. Martin?
I'd like our planner to respond to that.
Do you want to respond?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So in the past, the CCP has had ordinances in front of them from the council that have to do with funding, dollar amounts. And so on those particular things, when they are like public works in the past, and this was a facility owned by the city, they have wanted to hear from those city agencies to ask them the specifics about the money that's being asked to appropriate. So those are treated differently. That is not a text amendment. That is basically an ordinance about a financial situation. Because like when we had, a while ago, there was a question about Public Works generally wanting a large amount of money for some things. They said, we would really like to know the details of what's uncovered, what's being, what's this money for? So since that time, they've said, when it's something to do with appropriations of money, they would like to have someone internally speak about it. So if it's Public Works, I have Ryan come in, the Director of Public Works in this particular case, JP Marine, because he's representing the golf course on behalf of the city and doing this. That is the only reason on those type of applications that, we provide the opportunity. And that was at the request of the chairman and the members of the CCP. Is there any more questions about that? Thank you. Yeah.
Do you have another question?
Well,
Sure.
he's got the floor.
Sure.
You done?
I'm done.
Okay. The procedure you just outlined, I'm going to assume predates your position here with the city, because they have had other issues before them dealing with finances.
Absolutely. I mean, I can only tell you that, well, I've been here over a year, a little over a year, and trying to get the commission to, do things in a systematic way and continue to work that way with them. And this is just, I can't actually answer for what was happening before, but since I've been here, this is the way it's been handled into working with them so we can have a consistent way of doing business, that it's fair. Again, it's not, we weren't looking at it as a member of public. It's almost like someone on behalf of the city speaking to us. And that's why those opportunities were given. But in a particular thing that's going to have a public hearing, that is going to have like a text amendment, and you're giving us a referral, that it's just been decided upon that it's not a public hearing, and we want to make sure that the integrity of the process is kept.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The public hearing is over.
Okay. Second reading and action on the above ordinances previously presented. An ordinance appropriating $800,000 for the planning, acquisition, and construction of improvements to the Norwich Golf Course, and authorizing the issue of $800,000 bonds of the city to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
Is there a motion and second to waive the reading of the full text and incorporate it into the minutes, said ordinance being given the second reading? Mr. Martin and Mr. Nash, those in favor? And that's unanimous. Is there a motion second to put the following ordinance on the floor? Alderwoman Philbrick, Alderman Braddock. Is there discussion? Yes, ma'am?
If I could just have clarification in your cash outflow projections through calendar year 2027, and I commend you on this. This is what should come with every request for money.
Is there a particular person you'd like to have me bring up?
My question is if whoever could explain to me in your projections why there's an uptick in your utilities for 2018 and then it drops dramatically. I would assume that, I don't know why, so if someone could answer that question.
Thank you for asking the question. That's anticipating this new system not being online. We would love to have it online before we open in the springtime, but in case we can't for one reason or another, the monies were put together in that form. So hopefully we will be noticing something reduced as far as the utilities are concerned, but that's the reason for that, but not knowing exactly when we could get it online.
And your projections are dramatic, which is positive.
Well, this is why we want to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Pothier, do you have anything to add to the, no? Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will take a roll call, and I will remind the council that this requires a 2/3 vote. Mr. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Braddock?
Yes.
Alderwoman Philbrick?
Yes.
President Pro Tem?
Yes.
And Hinchey says yes. The motion carries. Thank you.
Oh, sure, bail after the easy stuff's over.
Number 2, an ordinance amending Section 6.3 of the Norwich zoning regulations as adopted by the ordinance 1721 on 10/19/2015 entitled Motor Vehicle Sales and Repair.
Is there a motion and second to waive the reading of the full text and incorporate it into the minutes, said ordinance being given the second reading? Alderwoman Philbrick and Alderman Braddock. Those in favor? Is your hand up there? Thank you. Is there a motion and second to put the following ordinance on the floor? Alderman Nash, Alderman Martin. Is there discussion?
I'll go first.
Yes, sir?
This is an awful lot of information that we got tonight, and we're asked to digest it all. But I'm just going to go from the only place I ever go from, and that's from my heart. I was 4 years old when the state made the regulations about 1,000 feet from another gas station, and obviously we haven't abided by that rule. If you look around, there's gas stations next to a gas station, next to a gas station across the street from gas stations. Just like there's Dunkin' Donuts next to Starbucks and Baker Dozens. There's Wendy's next to McDonald's, Burger King's, and Taco Bell's. There's Walgreens across the street from CVS's. They're all on major roadways. They all cause traffic issues. They all have problems. I understand that 50 years ago, technology was much different than today. Traffic studies are done to nauseam. We're always looking at, we just had the state come in here now and talk about putting 6 roundabouts in our city, all because of the new studies. I don't know if the opposition's traffic information is any different or any more substantial or more believable than the other people's that are saying it's not going to cause a problem. I can tell you, as a police officer, I drove up and down West Main Street for many years, and I always said one of the biggest problems we had were left-hand turns, coming out of places, going into places. Wendy's is one of the worst coming out of that. I can't understand how a Cumberland Farms going on that street corner would make traffic any less safe than it already is. If anything, it would deter people from making left-hand turns. I understand that competition's tough sometimes in our business, in the business world, and having another company that could sap off your patrons could suck. I could see that happening. But at this point, I heard the opposition, and as far as the safety issues are concerned, I don't know if I have enough information to make a decision based on that alone. So being the history of our city and the fact that we haven't seemed to be all that concerned about putting Dunkin' Donuts next to Dunkin' Donuts, next to Starbucks, next to Baker Dozens, next to gas stations, next to CVS's. I don't understand why I would be opposed to this. I'm not opposed to this. I'm going to support this ordinance as it is right now, and I know there's a lot more hoops that they have to jump through before they can build anything over there. So I say, with the way the businesses are in our community and we need tax revenue, I say give them the opportunity to prove to us that it's going to work there, and we still have an opportunity to turn around and say no. So that's it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to speak to what I think is actually in front of us, and it's not that picture or that concept. It's a request to change our zoning laws citywide. It is an application across the entire city. It's not just this corner. Much of the discussion has been about this corner, and that happens frequently in this room because of the traffic problems on that road. But one of the things that I see is the need for development in our community. And I don't think it's wrong for a community to review an ordinance that's almost 50 years old. We're not approving anything tonight if this ordinance passes. We're just saying the application can go forward. There's no approval here. It's not a done deal at all. If this goes forward, it means it can go down to the Commission on the City Plan, and they will do what they do. And they will have the final say, not us. So on that basis, I'm going to support this ordinance as it's requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else? Yes, ma'am?
We've heard lengthy and very technical discussions tonight. This is an incredible amount of information to digest, but I like to always bring it down to a level that I can understand. So I have made 5 bullet points. I'm concerned about the safety. I'm concerned about the density of this text amendment. Density meaning, as Mr. Nash said, Dunkin' Donuts on top of Dunkin' Donuts on top of Dunkin' Donuts. This is a citywide ordinance. And if we pass it tonight, it is certainly not the end of it. It may be anybody coming forward will have to jump through the hoops, but we have changed the zoning. We have made it less restrictive. To me, this applicant, by addressing it as Cumberland Farms, if it had been a generic application for a zoning change, but this causes me confusion and a little bit of discomfort because I'm wondering, is it spot zoning? Why is it for Cumberland Farms? Why isn't it? I mean, if it was to change the zoning throughout the city, but the fact that Cumberland Farms has been interjected into the dialogue makes me stop and wonder. I was under the impression that this property was currently in litigation. So I wonder how that fits into the equation. I believe that the city actually might be being sued, having to do to something with this property, which adds another level. We have the unresolved issue of the roundabouts. I have mixed emotions about competition. Competition is, so are we going to sacrifice a gas filling station that has been on the corner there for God knows how many years, and a new business, regardless of whoever, is it Sunoco or whoever who comes in and undercuts them? So you're taking an established business who has put a vested interest into the community and splitting the profits, for lack of a better word. So either they'll both survive, or the possibility exists that they both will fail. I will not be supporting this. I will not support a citywide ordinance change that will open the door for potential higher density development. Yes, we need to build our tax base, but we need to do it in the right way. We cannot sell our soul down the road for a particular entity. So that's my stance on this.
Is there anyone else? I will be supporting this ordinance. I agree that this motion is consistent with the plan of conservation and development, particularly in that it promotes economic development, reduces blight, and increases the tax base, and does not, in my mind, increase any public safety issues. Hearing no further discussion, we will do a roll call. Alderman Nash.
Yes.
Before you vote, there was a question about the effective date of this if it's passed.
Charter of Norwich basically would say that an ordinance passed by the council takes effect 10 days after it's adopted in the event that you do not formally suggest. And we adopt zoning regulation by ordinance under our charter system.
So that date would be
10 days after publication.
after publication. Okay. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Alderman Nash.
Yes, ma'am.
Alderman Martin.
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould.
No.
Alderman Braddock.
Yes.
Alderwoman Philbrick.
No.
President Pro Tem.
Yes.
Nystrom, and Mayor Henchy says yes. The motion passes 5 to 2. Thank you all very much.
Okay, petitions and communications. Report from the Commission on City Plan of the City of Norwich pursuant to Section 8-24 of the General Statutes and Chapter 15, Section 4 of the Norwich City Charter. An ordinance appropriating $800,000 for the planning, acquisition, and construction of improvements to the Norwich Golf Course, and authorizing the issue of $800,000 bonds of the city to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
A motion and a second to accept this report, please. Alderwoman Gould, Alderman Braddock, those in favor? It's unanimous.
Report from the Commission on City Plan of the City of Norwich pursuant to Section 8-24 of the General Statutes and Chapter 15, Section 4 of the Norwich City Charter, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the Town of Norwich by permitting in regards to amending Section 6.3 of the Norwich zoning regulations as adopted by Ordinance 1721 on 10/19/2015, entitled Motor Vehicle Sales and Repair.
A motion and a second, please, to accept this. Alderman Braddock, Alderwoman Gould, those in favor? And that's unanimous.
Communication from Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection regarding the proposed text amendment to local zoning regulation regards to amending Section 6.3 of the Norwich zoning regulations.
A motion and a second, please, to accept this report. Alderman Martin, Alderman Nash, those in favor? And that's unanimous.
Communication from Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments regarding proposed text amendment to local zoning regulation regards to amending Section 6.3 of the Norwich zoning regulations.
A motion and a second to accept this report. Alderwoman Philbrick, Alderman Braddock, all those in favor? And that's unanimous.
Communication from Comptroller regarding an update on motor vehicle bill delay.
A motion and a second, please. Alderman Braddock, Alderwoman Philbrick. All those in favor of accepting this? That would be unanimous. Thank you.
City Manager's report.
Excuse me. This is the City Manager's report for September 18th, 2017. The mayor and I have met twice, several times in the past 2 weeks. We met with Robert Red McKeon of Ockham per his request regarding a resolution for a park in Ockham. I attended the Regional Emergency Management Team CEO meeting at the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments for their annual budget presentation on September 6th. I attended the CCM legislative meeting in Wallingford on September 7th. The agenda included the state budget update and discussion concerning CCM and municipal approach to advocacy in 2018. I also met with Corporation Counsel and staff regarding the motor vehicle tax bills that are to be sent in October. A flu clinic was held on September 12th at City Hall with 24 employees participating. To date, 71 employees have been vaccinated at clinics held at City Hall, Police, and Fire Department. The Fire Department has 2 more clinics scheduled in September. I wish to thank Sue Dubb, public health nurse from Uncas Health, for providing this service to our employees. Staff and I met with 5 finalists to manage our debt program municipal advisory services. Final interviews will be held on September 20th. Over the weekend, I had the pleasure of attending the 134th Annual Connecticut Firefighter Association Convention and Parade. I attended the firefighter convention meeting at Kelly Middle School on Saturday, September 16th, where the mayor addressed the officers, state, and federal legislators invited guests. On Sunday, I enjoyed the parade from the reviewing stand. It was inspiring to see the firefighters and the fire trucks from across the state that participated. Thank you, Chairman Greg Schlau and his team for bringing this event to Taftville. I've appointed Kathy Kreese as Community Development Supervisor. Kathy previously worked for the Community Development Office for 13 years, leaving in 2006. She will rejoin the city on Tuesday, September 19th. The RFP for the sale of 80 Broadway and adjoining parking lot has been posted to the city's website, the Connecticut Department of Administrative Services, and Facebook. The property will be available for viewing from 4:30 to 5:30 on September 25th through 28th on October 2nd and 3rd. My assistant has contacted various departments and agencies to have handouts and business cards for potential buyers available during the site walkthrough. I have the key financial indicators treasurer's report from Josh Pothier for your review. This report has been done for 2 months ending August 31st and 8 months ending February 28th and 29th each year to coincide with major tax collections and storm season. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Does anyone have any questions of the city manager? Yes, ma'am?
Have all the has everyone completed the ethics training?
All but a few. I can give you a list of some. I think all employees have. I'm not sure if every board and commission has completed the ethics training. I can supply that information to you.
Is there a reason why?
No, I don't. I don't know why.
Okay. If you could get me that information, please.
Sure will.
Thank you.
Anyone else of the city manager? I just wanted to congratulate, this came in today, congratulate Catholic Charities right here in downtown. They were achieved national accreditation through the Council on Accreditation, and this ensures that they are providing the very best possible service to their consumers. And it is a mechanism that enables Catholic Charities to continually improve and evaluate the way it delivers services. So congratulations to Catholic Charities.
Citizen comment and resolutions?
This is time for you to speak to us about we have 3 resolutions on the agenda. I would ask you to please state your name and address clearly. And again, if you are involved in one of these because you work in the city or other involvement, please state where you live and where you work. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone? Anyone wishing to speak on the resolutions at hand? Anyone wishing to speak to the resolutions at hand? Anyone wishing to speak to the resolutions at hand? Hearing nobody? The citizen comment on resolutions is closed.
New business resolutions relative to setting a public hearing to opt out of temporary health structures.
Do we want to bring it? Okay. Could I have a motion and a second to bring this forward? Alderman Gould, Alderman Martin. A motion to
Let me just very quickly explain what this is. The public act that is at issue is 17-155, and it provides that absent action by a town, it's subject to the zoning aspects of this particular act. It allows any municipality, by vote of its legislative body, which would be the council, to opt out of such with certain terms and conditions. First, it has to hold a public hearing in accordance with the provisions of statute on the proposed opt-out. It has to affirmatively decide to opt out of this section. It has to state on the records why it has done that. It has to publish notice of the decision in the newspapers within a particular time. It also needs to refer the proposal to the zoning commission before it takes action on this. Since the council of Norwich is both the legislative body and the zoning commission, they're essentially establishing a date to have a public hearing on acting on this as the zoning commission, which could be the same time that you act on as the legislative body, which would require a separate public hearing. We had anticipated that there would be a commission of the city plan meeting tomorrow because of the impending storm. That's been canceled, but I believe the planner believes that they'll be able to set up a special meeting the following week, in which case you could consider it and have public hearing on this on October 2nd, which will be your next meeting. So if that's a date that's the council's comfortable with.
We need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion that we amend it to the October, to have a public hearing
On October.
on October 2nd.
Okay, and a second, please?
Second.
Alderman Braddock. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous. Now we return to the motion at hand, the resolution at hand. We have a motion and second and amended. Is there discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? And that's unanimous.
Relative to opt-out of temporary health structures.
A motion and a second, please. Ms. Alderman Martin, Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion?
Before you do, this is the resolution you need to refer to the commission for the public hearing that it will hold for its report for the public hearing you're going to hold on October 2nd. So this would need to be the resolution referred to the commission of the city plan for its input. And you'll have to postpone action on this until October 2nd.
So then we need a motion to. Okay.
Then I'll be happy to make a motion that we refer this to the commission on the city plan.
Second.
Okay, and a
For their
second.
action and report back to us.
Okay, and Alderman Braddock, you seconded it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous.
And this is continued to October 2nd, part of that
Yes.
motion.
Yes.
Okay, relative to extending the delay in hiring of certain positions and postponement of layoff of employees funded by general fund until November 1st, 2017.
A motion and a second, please. Alderman Nash, Alderman Braddock, is there discussion? Yes, sir?
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask our comptroller
Yes?
questions on this?
Mr. Pothier, would you come up?
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Josh? The first time we did this, it was our intent to give, I think, to some extent, the legislature time to act and for us to be consistent with our own decisions. Since it's dragged on now, and this, I think, represents the third time that we will be taking this action if it passes, what's happening to any savings that we heard about the first time? Are they eroding, eliminated? And if in fact this is about to start costing the city of Norwich more money, I think we might want to start notifying our elected officials in Hartford that they ought to get going and get a budget passed, because it's costing us more money if in fact this does start to do that.
So in dollar terms, these delays produce a small net savings. But
on the hiring?
Yeah, but between the two of them,
it's still a net savings?
It's a small net savings. I mean, what it does to operational efficiency, that's hard to put a dollar tag on, but it produces a small dollar savings.
So it's still consistent with the initial?
Right.
I just wanted that on the record if it was the case. Thank you.
Yep, welcome.
Alderman
I have a question. Are any of these three positions, or have any of these three positions been advertised and/or interviewed for?
I believe the recreation director position, I think the interviews are this week or were last week.
Okay, because I'm going to bring up 2 points. people that interview for jobs cannot wait 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. This is the lifeguard situation all over again. So we spend all this money to advertise and interview, and then we sit and we don't hire anybody. So we wasted the money, and then we have to start all over again. Which brings me to my segue into the line item for the lifeguards. What happens to the $38,000 that was allocated for the lifeguards? Who is monitoring that line item right now?
It's a part of the recreation budget, and
And they are dipping into it.
it's, I think, the only thing that I can think that it was spent on was a couple of bus trips.
I thought I heard something about telephones.
Oh, I can
The
get back
point
to
I'm
you on
trying
that.
to make is that if when we set a budget and we allocate X amount of dollars for A, B, C, or D, I would be a strong advocate of not having any department be allowed to move that money around willy-nilly without the pre-approval of the city council. Because just because you didn't spend $38,000, and I'll use that as an example, for the lifeguards, doesn't mean that you have $38,000 in your piggy bank. That money needs to be returned to the general fund. So I'm very concerned that, we advertised, we didn't get the lifeguards because of whatever. Now have a recreation director who's in the pipeline, but, it's just, I think this whole system needs to have a good look at. And that's not your department, that's somebody else's department. You're the money guy. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Potner.
Welcome.
Is there further discussion on the resolution number 3?
The only thing I want to like to say is that I too wish the state of Connecticut would go back to work and give us a budget, good, bad, or indifferent. Give us something so that we can, and not only the city of Norwich, but every city and town across our state needs to know where they're going to be. Less, more, the same. Just go and do your work. I don't want to see you out at events. I want to see your car parked in the parking lot at the Capitol in Hartford, and that means to me you're working.
I work in Hartford. I'll let her know if they're there.
Let me know.
I'm sure they're watching.
Okay.
I'll wave at them from
Okay, let's get back to business at hand. Any further discussion? Those in favor? And that's unanimous.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
may I have a moment of personal privilege? For our viewers at home specifically, to let them know that the cultural diversity event that was scheduled for tomorrow evening in Howard Brown Park, because of the impending storm, has been moved to Monday evening, September 25th at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, in case they didn't get the word, we don't want anybody to show up tomorrow night and not have had the message. So, for
Okay.
people at home, cultural diversity, Monday night, September 25th. Oh, and Kevin Gordon is here from WICH, and he'll let people know too. And so will Claire and Ryan. Motion to adjourn.
No, we're not done.
No, never mind.
Hold on.
Hold on, we got one more thing.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Please proceed.
New business ordinance. An ordinance to opt out of the provisions of Section A of Section 8-2 of the General Statutes as amended by Public Act 17-155 concerning temporary health structures.
Is there a motion and second to send a referral to the Commission on the City Plan, schedule a public hearing on the proposed ordinance for October 2nd, 2017 at 7:30 p.m., said ordinance being given its first reading?
So moved.
Before
Hold on.
you move on that, at the very end, there's a blank, because we didn't have the date set. That should be October 2nd, 2017.
So then we need
Well,
can we just fill it in?
just fill it in.
Has everybody got that?
No.
Yeah?
Please repeat. October 7th.
October 2nd.
Second, I got it.
The very last line.
The very
is
last
blank.
line,
That's where you're filling it in. Now that's the ordinance that's before you. That date.
with that date. So is there a motion to, I didn't get a motion and a second to send this to the President Pro Tem and Alderwoman Philbrick. All those in favor? All those in favor? Thank you. Now we'll entertain.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
And second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
That was not easy.